unajua nachukua video. Wacha nikwambie.
What is the purpose of education? This has been a serious debate in Kenya recently when President William Ruto said that because he has a PhD, therefore nobody should question his decisions or the way he leads the country. When the president said that, it reminded me of a time in the year 2024 when I was in the streets with Gen Zs who were demonstrating against some of the policies of his government. And it occurred to me that some of the reasons that were given by Gen Zs for their demonstrations, some of their diagnosis of the afflictions of our country, seemed to be more accurate than the president's.
Ruto kama mimi, mtoto wangu ana pampers. Mimi mtoto wangu ana pampers. Pampers moja ni 30, akona mwaka moja na nusu. Mimi pad nanunua 150 aje shwali Ruto. Mimi niko 18 years. Shwali. Mamangu ana pesa school fees, mamangu ana nini? Tunataka tuende wapi sasa? Ashinde.
Hatuna kazi na nataka tulipe taksi. Haiwezi. Wamepandisha jifuati mali. Hatuwezi lipa Ruto. Taksi hivyo. Wewe na jifuati. Lipa na
Niambie kwa nini una protest?
Mbona tuna protest? Protest finance.
Ongea kwa sauti.
It's punitive. It's retrogressive. Na tuitaki. Reject! Sawa, wazazi wetu wameumia. Sasa pia sisi tuumie, alafu pia watoto wetu waumie.
And for your
fanya the same shit. Staki go through the same shit.
All right.
My parents went through the same shit. Now they want us to go through the same shit. Doesn't make sense. So reject. Let me show you.
Reject the finance bill.
Hapo sawa. Let me tell you one thing. Hakuna hata mawe moja imerushwa. We're using our phones. That's the new weapon. That's the new weapon. And let me tell you something. This revolution will be televised.
I reject this financial bill of 2024. I reject. We can't tolerate such a thing like this. This man will come to kill us.
Hello. My name is Tamara. I'm 19. I'm 19 years old. Yeah, Gen Z.
Right.
If I wasn't here today, obviously I would be just going about my normal college life. Me as personally, it affects. I feel like it doesn't just affect me. It affects everyone, but individually, I don't think it's acceptable. The fact that they want to tax people above the age of 25, people who are unemployed, people who are probably not even gotten stabilized, people who have not. The second thing is the cancer patients. Personally, my grandmother died from breast cancer, and it's really, really painful to even witness something like that. The fact that they want to put tax on top of the already expensive treatment. Like I saw my parents paying that thing. I saw everyone in our family trying to chime in order to make her last days the best that they can be with the chemotherapy and everything, which already was not cheap.
Ongea. Sema.
Kwanza hapa nimekaa nimechoka nalia. Ruto amefanya nimekuja town, lakini alikuwa anafikiria tutaingia. Tumeingia kimendemende. Kikunguni. Si tuliingia town kiolwenda. Ai. Sasa mimi niko na miaka 30. Sasa nilireduce miaka yangu niko 20, niko Gen Z. Siko kwa hiyo 30. Sababu gani? Kama niko 30 na sina kazi. Na niko 30 na ninanyesa Ruto anapandisa always.
The big question tonight, kitu imefanya ni kwa streets. I never thought I'd be on streets one day. But why would somebody say that viti ni 1 billion? But kwani ni Old Trafford? Kwani hizo viti zimetengenezwa na ice? Unajua ndio kitu inatukasirisha. Mtu anasemaje ati hata sisi tulijenga nyumba, tuseme mimi nilijenga nyumba ya 30,000. Renovation haizipita 5,000. Nyumba ya 400 million, how comes renovation inakuwa 660 million? Yet the gargantuan fella is flying around with aeroplanes. I told my friends, niko na such amount. niko na such amount, mnitolee zingine. That means our friends watakuja na deal zingine zipite through Zakayo. And hiyo that is so questionable.
Mbona wakati wa kura angekuja wakati wa kura na hizo tear gas zenye anatuma polisi nao saa. Sasa angekuja nazo wakati wa kura ndio tujue sura yake mzuri.
What's wrong with the finance bill?
Bana kiongozi wetu lakini anatuumiza, si kama mimi kulimini Asla. Alituambia Asla atatoa ni bottom up. Bottom up ilikuwa kuuza chupa hivi kipiga hivi maji naisha yote. Tulikuwa vice versa. Tunahangaika hata tax price hizo sina ufugaji wa kuku. Kulima kidogo kidogo hapa. Tulikuwa watu wabaya lakini tumerekebika. Mbona kiongozi anafanya? Atuhurumie.
Sikia sasa, hii song nataka iende Ruto. Kumbukumbu, hii ni kumbukumbu tu. Ombi letu ni kwa mtukumbuke. Kumbukumbu nasema kumbukumbu wase. Kumbu manze mtukumbuke. Mama mboga nadai mkumbuke. Kazi kwa vijana mtukumbuke. Boda boda sema mtukumbuke.
Na tutaki atuambie eti tumetenga uongo bilioni 2. Hiyo hatutaki kujua.
Alisema ameweka 50 bilioni ya mama mboga na mtu wa boda boda. Sasa hivi tunazitafuta ziko wapi?
Nataka tusinyeshe juu mnafuata kumi.
We will keep on fighting.
Lakini Ruto kibuli yake ndio inafanya tukua hapa. Kibuli yake.
To the point where now that the president is speaking of his PhD, I asked myself whether the president really appears more educated than the Gen Zs who are questioning his leadership. Now the president begins to lay out his case. This is what he said.
Mimi nataka niwaulize nyinyi watu wa Garissa. Si mnajua tunauza chai ng'ambo? Si mnajua tunauza kahawa ng'ambo? Si mnajua tunauza mambo hiyo ingine ng'ambo? Hata maua pamoja na mboga tunauza ng'ambo. Tukiuza nyama ng'ambo iko makosa? Tukiuza maziwa ng'ambo iko makosa? Sasa watu wanatuletea Kiingereza kidogo kidogo. Si ndio? Na mkiona wale wanalalamika ni watu sijui wamesomea wapi. Si mimi niko na PhD. Si mimi naelewa nini inaendelea Kenya. Sasa mimi napata watu wengine wako na elimu kidogo kidogo wanajaribu kunifundisha. Mnanifundisha kazi gani?
When you analyze what the president says, essentially this is what the president is saying. This is what President William Ruto is saying. Ruto is saying that vultures fly, eagles fly, geese fly. Shouldn't ostriches fly too?
What I wish the government to do is to try and to minimize on that extravagant usage of the taxes.
That would seem to be a logical inconsistency. There's a logical fallacy attached to the premise which the president lays out. But again, when you do a bit of research, then you realize the president is saying much more than that. The president says that Kenya exports tea and exports coffee and all these other things. Therefore, Kenya should be able to export meat. But when you do a little research, you find that Kenya is actually already exporting meat. In fact, Kenya has exported in the year 2023 more than $83 million worth of meat to countries in the Middle East, East Africa, in Central Africa, and to other parts of the world. So the president is not saying what he's actually saying. He is saying, to use the analogy I gave, he's saying that vultures fly, eagles fly, and geese also fly. Shouldn't kites fly too? We know kites are already flying. Kenya is already exporting meat. So what was the president saying? Now, as I've already asked, there is a problem here with what is the purpose of education. What does education achieve? If you have a PhD, what should we see in you? If you have a bachelor's degree, or if you didn't go to school, shouldn't we be able to tell? There is a saying we've borrowed from West Africa, I believe from Nigeria, that what an old man sees when he is seated, a young man cannot see even when he is standing. I extrapolate that to suggest that what an intelligent person sees even when he doesn't have formal education might be more than an educated man with a PhD sees from his PhD standpoint. Now, the reason why this then becomes important for us as Kenyans is we all remember the old song that used to go like, so many vijana, muongeze pia bidii, mwisho wa kusoma, mtapata kazi nzuri sana. It basically means study, young man or young person, so that at the end of your studies, you may be able to get a good job. Perhaps the reason why Kenyans go to school is so that we can get good jobs, rather than that we might have knowledge. Greek philosopher Plutarch said, the mind is not a vessel to be filled, but rather a fire to be ignited. Perhaps we go to school not so much that we may learn how the planets move about the sun. Perhaps we go to school so we can attain a good office with a good salary without necessarily having to be able to interpret the world around us. Perhaps our president has a PhD, Our president has a PhD which does not allow him to understand what the problems of our country is. He got the PhD so that he can become president. If the youth understand the afflictions of this country better than our president, what does it imply? If the youth, some of whom have mere bachelor's degrees, some have no bachelor's at all, never been to university, some haven't even been to any tertiary institution, if these guys know more about our problems than the president, what does that tell us? It raises the issue of leadership. What qualifies one to be a leader in Kenya? For me, the best example of leadership has always been, and I believe will always be, Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior. Jesus says, if you look at the lifestyle of Jesus, whenever he was going to heal someone, he didn't just go and see a cripple and say, get up, I've healed you. Or a blind man and say, your eyes are open, now you can see. Instead, ignoring what many of us would consider obvious, Jesus asked the person, what would you have me do for you? Perhaps that's what Ruto should do. Instead of talking, going around the country and saying all these kinds of things, perhaps he should ask the citizens, what would you have me do for you? What is your actual problem? Because this ties in neatly with the issue of the housing levy. The president goes about building what he calls affordable houses. And Kenyans keep saying, we do not want affordable houses. We have more urgent problems that he should be addressing. The president goes out to dismantle NHIF, the National Health Insurance Fund, and comes up with something called SHA or SHIF, which is not working. The president began the process of expanding our biggest international airport, JKIA, while citizens were actually suffering with other problems. The president messed up with the funding for higher education, what we used to call HELB, and came up with a different format which sent the whole nation into uproar. In short, the president wasn't listening to the people. He was crafting solutions to problems that the people didn't have. Is that a better leadership, or is that a worse?
Why are you wearing that mask?
Why am I wearing this mask? To represent Ruto. The government is just money heads.
We don't want IMF in Kenya. Even World Bank, they should take their money somewhere else. We don't want them in Kenya.
If we use the example of Jesus, I think the president should be asking the people, what is your problem? What would you have me help you to solve? Because as we can already see from these videos that I'm playing here of the recordings I made, the clips that I made during the Gen Z demonstrations, it seems that the Gen Zs know what the problems of this country are. Perhaps the president would do well to ask them, what would you have me do for you? I want to apologize for some of the noise in the background. There's construction going on in my neighborhood and it can't be helped, but I hope my voice is loud and clear enough for you to hear. Another issue that all this raises is intelligence the same thing as education? It would seem that that's not the case, that a person can be intelligent without having gone to school, and a person can have a PhD and still be an idiot. What do you think? What is your view? Perhaps Kenyans should ask themselves these questions. We know there are laws that govern who is to qualify to run for president, to run for governor, to run for a member of parliament. Are those parameters correct? Do you agree with them? Some people have argued that leadership is a natural thing. Someone is either a leader born or not a leader at all. There are people who've said you can learn what leadership is. We know. We don't have leadership classes in this country. We do have a university called the Pan-African Christian University, PAC, which is run by CITAM, and it offers classes in leadership. Maybe that's something that the president may want to look at. Maybe he should go back to school and get his PhD in leadership. Okay, now that he has a PhD, which already other people are questioning, it would seem that that PhD is not helping him, not only in understanding what the problems of our country are, but also in terms of being able to approach people. Somebody said the true mark of leadership is in listening, which is what Jesus was doing. He listened to people. He asked, what's your problem? What can I help you to solve? Maybe our president needs to go back to school. Maybe President Ruto needs to re-examine his education. And maybe if he did, it would help him and his government craft a better education system for our country. Maybe our youth do not need degrees. Maybe we don't need PhDs. Maybe we need an education that helps us to solve our problems. An education that helps us to ask, what are our problems and how do we solve them? Just like Plutarch said, the mind is not a vessel to be filled with ideas or with formulas. Perhaps the mind is a fire to be ignited to help us solve our problems. What do you think? Do you agree? Get in touch. Make a comment down there. And before you go, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel. When you subscribe, you really help me. You support the channel. I'm able to do much more with your support. So subscribe. Do not ignore. Subscribe. We can make better videos with your help when you subscribe. Thank you.